Jarren Duran and Rafael Devers were obviously the Red Sox superstars in 2024, but who were the team's most underrated players?
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part is it is all completely free. So you might as well tune in because Locked On is your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to win $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. You have made it to Friday. That's great news for you. Congratulations. Happy Friday. Welcome to Locked On Red Sox, the show where I try to remain positive until I absolutely cannot anymore. And if this is your first time listening, you can ask anybody who's listened to this show that during the 2024 Red Sox season, I was holding out so much hope that they would give me a reason to be optimistic. And all the way up until they were eliminated from postseason contention, I was saying this team still has a shot. And I was saying, they are not mathematically eliminated, so I'm not going to talk about it as if they are eliminated. I, of course, would acknowledge that the chances were slim that they would make the playoffs. And I started doing some mock offseason moves that I hoped the Red Sox would make, but I still couldn't bring myself to say they are out. And I hope that next season they give me a reason to continue to be optimistic through the entirety of the season and that they do make the playoffs so that we can sit here and enjoy some October baseball as Red Sox fans and not be sitting here sad that the Red Sox did not make it. Because honestly, I love playoff baseball regardless. There are so many intense moments and just a lot of really good games that take place, but it's not nearly as fun when you can't root for your favorite team. Like, yes, I have certain teams at this point that I want to see go further than others, aka the Cleveland Guardians, who cannot seem to figure things out against the Yankees. So that would be nice if they could come back in that series. But you don't feel the same way. Like, it's not that same passion. So we need to get postseason baseball back for the Boston Red Sox ASAP in 2025. Hopefully they make the right moves in the offseason to make that happen. But when we look back on the 2024 season and everything that they accomplished and lack thereof, because there was definitely more of the lack thereof, it was super frustrating. And they finished the season with an even record at 500, 81 and 81. And before the season started, I predicted 83 wins. I thought they would pick up a couple more. Did not think they would get swept as much as they did during the season. And I was overall genuinely feeling this way about this team, that they were average and that they probably wouldn't make the playoffs, but they would show slight improvement from last year. So they did show slight improvement from last year, not finishing below 500 and also not finishing last in the division. And they were in the playoff conversation for a lot longer than people thought they would be. And for me, that's a positive, that for the majority of the season, we were able to talk about the potential of playoff baseball in Boston. And unfortunately, since the standards are so low now and the bar is really low based on their performance the last few years, just being able to talk about playoffs is an accomplishment. And there were players who certainly were underrated that contributed to that. Obviously, you have the players like Jarren Duran and Rafael Devers, who were big contributors all season long. Tyler O'Neill, who would just crush baseballs, was a big contributor. Somebody who did a lot for this team in 2024 and made a big difference in the lineup with his power and his right-handed versatility. But you certainly had the players that flew under the radar a little bit and made a bigger impact than you might think. And one of those players was David Hamilton. Hamilton going into the season was not supposed to have a regular spot on this team. He was supposed to come into this year and likely play a lot in AAA and not be a guy that the Red Sox were going to start on the Major League roster. But because of injuries that took place early on in the season, he got a pretty quick opportunity to go out there and start for this Boston Red Sox team. And when he started, he immediately showcased what he could do, primarily from an athletic standpoint and his speed and his ability to get around the base paths quickly and put pressure on opposing pitchers, because a pitcher is going to feel antsy if there's a base runner on who you know is a huge threat to steal. And David Hamilton was almost an automatic base stealer. Like, chances are that if he gets on base, he's going to successfully steal. And that makes a pitcher nervous. And then naturally that could lead to them not throwing as many strikes to the next hitter. So that alone was a big asset that David Hamilton provided. He helped the Red Sox get a lot more runs on the board early in games because of his ability to get himself into scoring position almost instantly. And he could stretch singles into doubles a lot more than the average player can. And I don't think people really appreciated enough how important that was for him. That's going to give him a career for a long time, because even if he's not a regular member of a playoff roster, he could be used as a pinch runner in a lot of situations, especially in really tight games late. Have him go in there and try to get himself into scoring position. So that alone is valuable, because if the Red Sox didn't have that, then you're looking at Jarren Duran at the top of the lineup who's fast, but then you're not really looking at another super fast player on this roster until Cedar Rafaela in the 9-hole. So then everybody in between is average. I mean, with speed, they can steal bases, sure, but not to the same extent that Jarren Duran and David Hamilton could. So Hamilton's speed alone provided a ton of value for this Red Sox team. And not only that, but he did have a good bat going. And yes, he needed to gain more power in his bat. And yes, he had to gain a little bit more plate discipline. But when he was up there, he was able to hit. And he was able to give the Red Sox a lot offensively that they could be happy about. He was a guy who could go out there and perform. And the Red Sox needed that. They needed guys who could go out there and be reliable. And was he the best hitter on the team? No, definitely not. And he had his struggles defensively for sure, which held his game back a little bit. But he was a guy who was athletic enough to where he could make it work. And even if it was a slow roller on the infield grass, a lot of times he would get to first base on those. And it's the little things like that about his game that made a difference. He's a great sacrifice bunter. He's a guy who you can rely on to try to get him to bunt, but it doesn't even have to be a sacrifice every time because he's really fast, so he could even be safe on it still. So little things like that David Hamilton does. Would I keep him as a regular in the lineup? Not necessarily, but I am keeping a roster spot for him because he's somebody who in any situation can come in to run, and that's just so valuable in itself. So he's somebody who I felt was underrated in terms of his contributions in 2024. Another player who certainly was underrated was Cooper Criswell, because Criswell, when he came to this team, the Red Sox were not planning on making him a starter. I mean, they were having him work his arm during the offseason in hopes and in the situation that maybe he would end up being a starter and that he would get that opportunity. But until Garrett Whitlock got injured, he wasn't being thought about as a starter. The Red Sox wanted him to pitch in the bullpen, and that is a lot of what he was doing. And he was throwing in the bullpen as a guy who was contributing for sure out of the bullpen, but then they had a spot open up in the rotation, so he started pitching there. And the biggest thing for me that stood out was he made that transition with such ease. Used to pitching in the bullpen and then goes into the rotation and shoves. I mean, he was a guy who you could rely on a lot of the time in that starting rotation, and not a lot of people talked about that. He would go out there and look really good as a starter and looked more consistent than guys like Nick Pivetta and Cutter Crawford out there. He would go out there and he would look like a guy who could take care of business and be a regular rotation player. And that was huge. We needed a guy like that as kind of a pick-me-up, like a surprising in the best way possible type of player to come in and pitch out of this rotation when Garrett Whitlock couldn't pitch. And he was truly the guy that the Red Sox needed. And I really liked seeing his ability to adapt to any given situation. And the Red Sox moved him back into the pen. He pitched there again and was totally fine. And even just his attitude towards the whole thing, because attitude is huge and something that the Red Sox and any team really enforces, is having guys who are flexible and are willing to do whatever it takes to put their team in the best position to succeed, whether that means playing in a position they're not used to or bouncing around. Those are the types of players that you want. And that's exactly what Cooper Criswell was, a guy who was flexible and a guy who was willing to do anything in order to make his team be put in the most successful place to win, not for himself and whether he was going to struggle. And he didn't struggle, and he did the whole thing with ease. And I really liked what I saw from him. I hope he gets more of an opportunity in 2025, because I do feel like there's more to Criswell still that we have yet to see, even though he's impressed a lot so far in what he's done for this Red Sox team as a pitcher. So looking forward to his opportunities in 2025. And coming up, I'm going to be talking about some more players who were underrated in 2024 for the Boston Red Sox that I bet you didn't really bat an eye and even think about, really. Your sex life is important, but your schedule is busy. You don't have the time to go to a doctor's office to get treated for ED. Through Hims, you can get a personalized ED treatment without stepping foot outside your door. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. Hims provides access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints and Viagra and Cialis and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products, which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. If you're a guy, I'm telling you, this is probably in your best interest to have. Just trust me, bro. Just a reminder that I am getting married tomorrow. It's literally crazy. Like, I cannot believe it. This time has absolutely flown by, and it's been so much fun planning a wedding. But in my absence, while I'm going on a beautiful honeymoon to Grand Cayman, if anybody has suggestions, let me know. Steve Lennox, host of the Locked On Red Sox postcast during the season, will be hosting the show for 2 weeks while I am gone. And I promise you are in fantastic hands with Steve. Super knowledgeable, great baseball talent, and he has you covered. So be sure you support him and continue to listen to the show. But when it comes to the Red Sox, as we wait for when they can start making some moves for this offseason and improving the team for 2025, we're looking back on the 2024 roster, and we're talking about underrated players that the Red Sox had that made them stay in the playoff conversation for longer than I think anybody would have expected them to. And a couple of those players who I've already listed are Cooper Criswell and David Hamilton, guys who weren't talked about a lot as much as they should have been, but really served as key contributors and reasons why the Red Sox grew into a team that was able to stay in the running for a while. And then you have some players who in the first half of the season versus the second half contributed more versus less, and Connor Wong gets thrown into that category of a player who in the first half of the season certainly was a little bit underrated because his bat was phenomenal in the first half, and he was one of the most consistent hitters in the Red Sox lineup. And I think the main reason it was a little bit underrated is because of the fact that Red Sox fans didn't expect it, so they weren't really realizing how good his bat actually was at the time, because he was going out there and consistently performing every night. And it got to the point where the Red Sox wanted him in the lineup every night, even when he wasn't catching. So they would make that happen. And he was playing in the field, and we saw him play in the field a lot more towards the end of the season. But because of the fact that he had been hitting well, the Red Sox wanted him out there even when he wasn't catching. And he came in big. Like, there were times where Connor Wong was the hero for the Red Sox, and that didn't happen as much in the second half. He definitely took a step back in that second half and wasn't as much one of those reliable hitters that the Red Sox had in the lineup, but his first half kept the Red Sox in it for a while. He was a guy who the Red Sox could rely on, and he would go out there and he would absolutely take care of business in that first half and drive in runs and be a power hitter that the Red Sox were looking for. And it was fun to watch him, but underrated in the first half for sure, but definitely not in the second half, because his numbers decreased a lot in the second half in terms of his ability at the plate. Then you look at even more players, guys who came out of the bullpen, and this bullpen for the Red Sox was an absolute disaster in 2024. Guys who could not figure it out and get it together, and guys who really just were not able to find the strike zone consistently. But one player who I'd say was a little underrated that wasn't recognized enough for his efforts was Cam Booser, because did you know that Booser was their best reliever for a good portion of the season, especially in the first half? He was the guy who was that lockdown guy that was getting the job done and was going out there and getting the outs and had his command of the strike zone and was getting lots of swings and misses and wasn't letting up lots of runs out of the bullpen, which you can't say for a lot of these guys, like their trade deadline acquisitions, or Josh Winkowski, who struggled this season more so than we're used to seeing him struggle, and Zach Kelly, who struggled a lot during the season. And I get that usage was part of the issue, but it's important to recognize what Cam Booser actually brought to the table from a bullpen standpoint, because he was certainly one of the Red Sox most reliable pitchers all season long. And he was only a bullpen guy, never started, but he was a guy the Red Sox could go to, and you could feel like you had it under control when he was out there. You could feel like the Red Sox had a sense of comfort knowing he was out there. And yes, he had some rough outings, especially late in the season. And again, I do feel like over usage is a big part of that. And as he was a guy who pitched a lot more than he had been used to. So I do think that was a factor. But if you look at his numbers from a lot of the season, he was far from the problem with the Red Sox bullpen. And I don't think enough people recognized him for that, just because of how much of a disaster this bullpen actually was. And when you look at bright spots for this Red Sox team, you can't go without talking about Cedar Rafaela. Obviously, his offense wasn't that good, and I'm hoping he can develop some more plate discipline over time. But his defense was phenomenal, and he saved lots of runs, whether he was playing in the outfield or he was playing at shortstop. And he was able to move around, and that's really valuable. Having guys like him who could go out there and play multiple positions and be able to give the Red Sox what they need at whatever position it was that he was playing in at the time. That's huge. And that alone is an underrated quality in a baseball player, somebody who can go out there and be adaptable and play whatever position is needed of them at the time. So that's what I loved about Cedar, that he was able to do that and capable of doing that. Another player who has consistently been a bit underrated and got a little bit more talked about this year, but still doesn't get all the credit that he deserves, is Rob Refsnyder. I mean, talk about a true veteran leader who goes out there every single day and just grinds and serves as a great mentor in the clubhouse for some of the younger players that were struggling to find their ground, or guys who were struggling with obstacles they'd go through, like an injury or maybe being optioned back to AAA and then being called back up. A guy who has seen it all and has been through a lot in his career and has played for quite a few different teams, that's able to offer a good perspective to some of these younger players on what mentality it actually takes to be successful at the major league level. I think that is more of a game changer in this clubhouse than people really give him credit for. You need to have that veteran presence. And this is a Red Sox team that has lots of young players on it, guys who hopefully will be breakout stars one day, but are just not there yet. Guys who the Red Sox look forward to seeing down the line, guys who they know can contribute later on. But you need to have guys who have already been there, done that, have been through a lot of their career and have seen lots of different things and faced lots of different obstacles. And Refsnyder was the perfect guy to be that mentor in the clubhouse for these younger guys. And you could even hear it in his interviews when he would talk about this Red Sox team and how everybody needs to stay focused and what they need to do. It sounded like a true leader and veteran saying that. And that's huge for a Red Sox team that really needs that. And not only that, but the other thing Refsnyder brought to his game this year that people didn't recognize as much was the drastic improvement against right-handed pitching. Because he was always a threat against lefties. He would hit lefties really well. And pretty much every game in which the Red Sox were facing a lefty, he'd be in the lineup because that was his area of expertise. And he would come in big when he was pinch hitting, especially against a lefty. And a lot of times, Alex Cora would make that move when there was a lefty on the mound to bring him in to pinch hit, even if he didn't start in the lineup that day. So that was all a game changer for the Red Sox, but it made it even more of a game changer this past year when he started hitting well against righties too. Because you know what? If he's hitting really well against both righties and lefties, talk about a season. I mean, he had one of the best seasons of his career in 2024, and that's because of him being able to hit against pitchers who throw both sides. And that was absolutely huge for a Red Sox team that needed it. They needed guys who could do that and could hit righties and lefties well, because honestly, this team struggled a lot against left-handed pitching because they had lots of lefties in the lineup. And the fact that he could do both made him a really important asset to this lineup. And I don't quite think people talked about that enough in regards to the fact that he was able to make a difference in a variety of different ways because of his ability to hit well. Yes, he was a defensive liability. He would blunder the ball quite a bit in the outfield, but that is certainly the weak part of his game, and he's acknowledged that and he knows it. But the fact that he was able to be such a key part of this lineup and wasn't all that talked about for it is definitely something that should be recognized, because it saved the Red Sox lineup a lot of the time when they needed that guy to go out there and be able to hit against a righty and hit against a lefty, and we could feel confident both times that he would get the job done. Another player who got called up kind of late but made a difference for the Red Sox was Nick Sogard. I mean, he got a hit in his first major league game when he got called up, and he continued to put together some impressive at-bats, and it was a really silent success. A guy who would go out there and would help drive in runs and would be able to contribute a lot from an offensive standpoint. And I think the reason people weren't talking about it that much is because they were still getting used to him as a player and getting to know him as a player and his style and what he was good at and what he wasn't and what worked for him and what didn't. Well, meanwhile, when everybody was doing that, he was going out there and silently putting up really good numbers for this Red Sox team. And I really appreciated and liked that, because that was another young player who was waiting for his opportunity to get called up. And then he finally got that opportunity. And he just completely embraced it. Went out there and didn't even try to be vocal about it or flaunt or show off these impressive at-bats he was putting together. He just go out there and did a job. He would just go out there every day and just do what he had to do to advance a base runner or drive in a run or just get himself on base. He would go out there and do the little things right. And quite honestly, put together some of the best at-bats that we've seen on the team. I definitely want to see more of Sogard. I feel like he deserves more of an opportunity to be called up and get a more regular spot. The question is just going to be, is there realistically a spot for him? There really only was one this season because of injuries. So if they're able to continue to have him there, that would be fantastic, because I think he's shown that he deserves an opportunity because he put together lots of very mature at-bats in his short stint in the majors. We're talking about underrated players on the 2024 Red Sox roster. I'm telling you, there are more players that you probably wouldn't have even thought to put in this conversation. So that's coming up next. But first, Prize Picks is the place for you if you're looking for a fun way to play daily fantasy sports. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this football season in particular. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on Prize Picks. Just download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed in Prize Picks at all if you want to win lots of money, so don't hesitate to check it out. In talking about the Boston Red Sox and the 2024 season, there were definitely underrated players who weren't talked about enough among this Red Sox team. And one of those players is reliever Luis Guerrero, who didn't get a huge opportunity, but was throwing really well in AAA this year. So he got his call up to the Red Sox late in the season. And boy, did he make that call up worthwhile. Made a big impact out of the bullpen. And with a bullpen that was so depressing to watch, especially after the All-Star break and just all the incompetencies and not being able to pitch consistently, he was certainly a shining light because he came out of that pen and he gave us hope for the future. He had many shutdown innings and shutout outings in general and would go out there and just freaking shove. Like, he didn't say anything that was obnoxious. He was never overly vocal, but he would go out there and show lots of maturity and poise on the mound. And if he got into any trouble at all, he would take a step back, reevaluate, and be able to go out there and get out of the inning. And that's exactly the qualities you want in a reliever in Boston, is somebody who's going to go out there and be able to get out of that trouble, because the Red Sox bullpen in general in 2024 didn't have a lot of guys who could go out there and do that. But Guerrero showed that he could go out there and do that, get through the hard times with runners on base and not break focus and be able to still go out there and get the job done no matter what. And another pitcher who did that out of the bullpen too was Zach Penrod, who again also didn't get a huge stint in the majors in 2024, but did get his opportunity as well when he got called up from Worcester. And again, another pitcher who just absolutely shoved out of the Red Sox pen and put up zeros across the board a lot of the time. And when you look at this bullpen and the guys that Breslow was trying to acquire to make up for the incompetencies, like acquiring Louis Garcia and Lucas Sims, guys who ended up on the IL and couldn't even pitch for a lot of time they were here when they were brought in at the trade deadline, or other guys that were just falling apart for this Red Sox team, like Zach Kelly and Josh Winkowski. And then you had Chris Martin hurt for a lot of the time, so he couldn't even be utilized. Guys who were just not reliable. But these two came from their call-up, and they were reliable. And they wanted to show the world that they deserve spots. And I truly feel like they do deserve spots in the Red Sox bullpen in 2025. And another guy who absolutely deserves a spot in the bullpen is Justin Slayton, another player who was absolutely nasty out of the Red Sox pen. He faced injuries in 2024 too. But then when he came back, he still dominated the same way that we saw him dominate in the earlier part of the season. He did in the late part of the season too, once he came back from injury. And that was great to witness, because Justin Slayton was somebody the Red Sox acquired, and they were hoping that he was going to turn into somebody who was an absolute stud on the mound. But obviously they weren't sure if that was going to happen or not. but boy, did it happen. Justin Slayton, to me, was the most reliable reliever that this Red Sox team had. And you could throw Kenley Jansen and Chris Martin into the reliable category generally, for sure. But Jansen did have his moments. It was an absolute roller coaster when he was out there on the mound. You didn't know if he was going to get through it or not. And the majority of the time he got through it, did blow a couple saves in the mix there, but he generally, even if he had base traffic, was able to get out of it and save the game for the Red Sox. Chris Martin, 8th inning lockdown guy, didn't start the season off in the strongest way, but then he did face an injury and ended up missing time, and also took some time off due to some mental health issues that he was going through. But when he was out there, especially in the later part of the season, he was still the Chris Martin that we knew and loved, that could be that reliable lockdown 8th inning guy that we had seen a season ago. So you could throw them into the reliable category, but nobody was more reliable than Slayton. And I feel like Slayton got talked about, but was still a little underrated because people didn't realize how much he actually contributed. And I think it's because he did miss some time. So because he missed some time, people weren't paying as much attention to him and exactly what he was doing. But his numbers that he put up were insane in 2024. And I'm expecting really good performances from him in 2025 too. So when you look at this Red Sox bullpen and you look at Zach Penrod, Luis Guerrero, and Justin Slayton, those are all talented arms that you can form the foundation of your bullpen around. And then if you add Liam Hendricks back in and Garrett Whitlock back in, who hopefully will be healthy, that's a solid pen for the Red Sox to work with. And then they can acquire a couple arms along the way this offseason that they can add to that. And then you're looking at a really competitive bullpen, because the guys that they had this past year were not cutting it. And they know this. Even Brennan Bernardino struggled a lot in 2024, and he was one of their best, most reliable relievers in 2023. So the Red Sox know this. Like, they know who their guys are that they could trust and rely on in 2024. Those are the guys they need to keep around. And Justin Slayton certainly was one of those guys, an underrated aspect of this Boston Red Sox team, in that he would go out there and get the job done every single day, no matter the circumstance. And he also showed a lot of poise on the mound when there was base traffic. And sometimes pitchers tend to fold in those moments. And if the bases are loaded and they're out there, they tend to freak out and get a little bit nervous and aren't able to handle the situations the best. But he was always able to go out there and get that done. And another underrated player that definitely needs to be talked about is Romy Gonzalez. He's somebody who would go out there and, if he was pinch hitting, would get a hit the majority of the time. He was so consistent as a pinch hitter, and that's why Alex Cora used him a lot in that role. He was a guy who would go out there and silently be a killer at the plate. And then also, not even when he was pinch hitting, but just in general, he would hit really well wherever he was playing. He would play first base, he would play second base, and he was okay with bouncing around, and he was fine with that. And he'd go out there, he'd play whatever position was needed, and he'd hit the ball really hard, and he would drive in runs for the Red Sox. So he made a true impact by being a clutch hitter for this Red Sox team that was also adaptable and willing to play a couple different positions. So I really enjoyed watching Romy play this year. I think he earned more of an opportunity to have more moments in a Red Sox uniform in 2025. So even though overall the season was rough for the Red Sox, definitely some underrated players that deserve to be recognized. And hopefully they go into 2025 with a complete roster and a team that really could fight for a playoff spot. But us as fans just have to keep the faith like we always do. Appreciate you making Locked On Red Sox your first listen today. After this, you can head to Locked On MLB with host Paul Sullivan, aka Sully, who uses his humor to share what's going on around the league. So after this, you can check out his show to stay up to date on everything going on with the playoffs. Go Red Sox. I will miss you for 2 weeks, but hope you enjoy Steve Lennox taking over. I promise you, you are in good hands. So for the last time for a bit, before I have a new last name, go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.